So, The Village from the year 2004, M. Night Shyamalan's thriller slash suspense slash horror film takes place in a village, seemingly from like the 1800s or something like that. But there's some mysterious monsters that keep the villagers from leaving the boundaries of the town, which is surrounded by a forest. And that's the main premise, and it's Shyamalan, so we know that there's a crazy twist, because that's his fucking thing that he does. But, and I'm gonna try not to ruin the twist if anyone hasn't seen this movie, but, I do have some notes on it, but I'm trying not to give spoilers out, but we'll get into it. But yeah, that's the basic plot, is there's these people in this village, and some of them want to venture out into the village, or out of the village to the towns to get medicines and that kind of thing, but some of the elders do not want that. Because of these creatures outside and all around the forest. So, let's look at the Rotten Tomatoes page. 43% on Rotten Tomatoes is what this gets for critics. So, the first three movies that Shyamalan did, I think, were The Sixth Sense. I think that was the first one. Then it was Unbreakable, I think. And both those were crazy good. I think those are his two best movies, probably, actually. And then Signs, which the critics still loved. But I think that was sort of when he started to fall off a little bit. But this one's probably technically worse than Signs, but I think I might like it a little more. It's just, like, the imagery, the basic plot, it just appeals to me a little more than Signs. And plus, the twist of that makes me angrier than the twist of this, but a lot of people don't like the twist in this. So yeah, 43% for critics, which isn't great, but it's also not terrible compared to a lot of his other movies, for their ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, other than Signs and the other movies that he did first. Unbreakable and Sixth Sense. I had him and I lost him and I have him again. There we go. But 57% audience score, which is better but still not fresh technically. 250,000 ratings though. That's a lot. 220 critic reviews. Let's look at the critics' consensus. The Village is appropriately creepy. I do think they do that part well. But Shyamalan's signature twist ending disappoints. And I get that, but I didn't think it was that bad, and I can't really get into the specifics of it without spoiling it. So I won't. Let's read some of the reviews here on Rotten Tomatoes. It all comes to a head in perhaps the greatest sequence Shyamalan has ever filmed. Whoa, this person really liked it. Shyamalan's film never send that chill up the bone up because of a second viewing. And I get that because of all of the twists, because once you know the twist of a movie, it sort of makes that movie not as interesting. Although it was a long time since I've seen this, so it wasn't too bad going back to this and watching it again. It was almost like watching it for the first time, even though I kind of knew the twist, but I didn't know the exacts of it. There were some things that I wasn't sure about, and honestly, I liked it overall. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's not as bad as people give it credit for, I think. Or don't give it credit for, however you want to look at it. Here's another good review. The entire solemn, portentous edifice that is the village collapses of its own fake weight. So I think what that's basically saying is that what most people are saying is that the twist is just not what they expect or we're hoping for. That's sort of what I get from that. Anyway, frankly, if you believe this twaddle, you'll believe anything. And if you believe anything, you don't need to go to the films. You can just sit at home and fantasize for free. Well, maybe this isn't their point, but to me that sort of says, you can, if you don't believe it, then it's not good. But it's a movie. You can believe it if you suspend your disbelief, but I guess it didn't do it for them, which fair enough. But I really think it's believable enough. Yeah, there's some inconsistencies in the plot, and maybe some things don't make practical sense, but it's still a good movie. Not good, maybe even, but at least okay. This is not his worst work, that's for fucking sure. This ain't no The Happening. This ain't no After Earth. Those movies are inherently worse than this, I would say. But yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender, After Earth. What's another one that's really shitty? There's a few, but you could probably go off naming a few, but I like this better than Signs, actually. But it's definitely not his worst work. That's the point I'm trying to make. Anyway, that's the Rotten Tomatoes. Let's move on to the IMDb. 6.6 out of 10 is what it gets on IMDb, which is pretty decent. Maybe even too high. Some might debate for IMDb, but I don't know. I think it's fair, actually. I'll probably give it around that, maybe a little higher. We'll see. Pretty good cast, I would say. It's a pretty star-studded cast. So we got Sigourney Weaver is in this. We got Joaquin Phoenix, Adrian Brody, Brendan Gleeson, Judy Greer. Yeah, those are the ones that I recognize the most. But Frank Collision looked familiar, who played Victor. Jesse Eisenberg, yes, he's in this. And I think I actually have a note. I think he's only in like one scene. It has like one line, and he's like an extra mostly, but he says like one thing, and he's in this movie. This was before he was a big deal, but still, it was kind of funny. For a second, I was like, holy fuck, it's Jesse Eisenberg for a second. I thought that was kind of cool. Oh yeah, The Happening was another movie by Shyamalan that is definitely worse than this, in my opinion. Although, it's debatably so bad it's good. It's that level of bad that's so funny at a certain point. If you haven't seen The Happening, I actually would recommend it because it's so stupid, it's funny. Let's look at the box office information. I think this movie did well. His movies were doing well at this point still. Box office. So the budget is $60 million, and it grossed $256 million. Holy shit. So it did very well. His movies were kicking ass in the box office then. And even quite a bit after this movie, that he was still sort of not dominating, but kicking ass in the box office, I would say. But yeah, $60 million budget and gross worldwide $256 million. So that's pretty great, I must say. And that's all for the IMDb page. Let's move on down to my notes. The Village notes. Why is it good that nobody saw Lucius go to the tower? So I guess this sort of makes sense now, but there's a part where Joaquin Phoenix, his name is Lucius in the movie, he goes to see his friend in the tower, and then his friend in the tower is like, oh, I hope that no one saw you. And I guess looking back now, he must not be allowed, like there must be some sort of curfew, or you're not supposed to disturb the night watchman or something, but I don't know. I think he should be allowed to. Like, it doesn't make that much sense, and they don't explain it that well. So I think my notes still make sense. It's like, why is it good that nobody saw him? Why isn't he allowed to go to the tower? They don't explain that. Anyway, moving on. I like how long they hold shots in this movie. You can tell that Shyamalan has love for film, and he has love for old movies. And in older movies, they would do what they do in this. Hold shots longer. Plant the camera and have characters saying dialogue for longer than you might expect them to, especially nowadays. But that's how they would do it back then. They cranked on the camera, have them do the dialogue back and forth. Not now when it's like, cut. Every time someone says a line, cut to their face, cut to their face, cut to their face. That can be a little too much sometimes, and I like it. It's refreshing in a movie when they do this and they slow it down and they let you take it in and they let you breathe. And it doesn't work for every movie, but sometimes it can make the movie boring, but I think that Shyamalan did a good job of this particular thing in this particular case. Moving on. So this note is just sort of on how Shyamalan's dialogue is weird sometimes. This is a thing that Sigourney Weaver says in the movie. You remind me of a cult sometimes. And there's no further divergence into this. That's all it's said. It's just, you remind me of a cult sometimes. Like, why? Why does he remind you of a cult sometimes? It would have been interesting to to hear a little bit more. And they do that a few times in this movie where they cut off before you want them to cut off. You want to see where the scene goes a little longer, but then they just cut it, and you're like, okay, that was a weird line, and that was a weird choice to cut there, but okay, Shyamalan, I guess. Anyway, moving on, next note. Even though it worked out, it seems a little weird that the blind girl is waiting for Lucius in a place of danger when she could just go inside. So at this point in the movie, the monsters, we know that they're outside of the limits of the village, but they don't bother the town, or they don't bother the village as long as they don't go into the woods. And I guess Joaquin Phoenix went into the woods, and so now there's been a sighting of the creatures, and the creatures are in the village, and so everyone's running to their houses to try to be safe. But the love interest, Ivy, the blind girl, she is in love with Joaquin Phoenix, so she's trying to like save him and be like, oh, I think he's still out. I want to make sure he's okay, but I don't know. I'm the kind of guy that thinks of this logically. It's like, these monsters are out in the town. You should just get into the bunker immediately. He's probably fine. He'd probably go into his own house. But she's focused and fixated on getting him with her, which I get to a certain extent. They establish that they are interested in each other romantically, but still, just the fact of her waiting there just seems like, come on, like just get out of there before you die. You could die if you wait out there, and he wouldn't have wanted you to die, but you know it works out like just in time. Joaquin Phoenix comes and they hide in the bunker, but still, I think that's a little weird. That she's holding her hand out like that when she could easily get killed by the creatures, hypothetically, right? Anyways, Sigourney says that it's not a coyote, but that's been established at this point. So, in the movie, near the beginning, there's all these animals that turn up around the village that are skinned and dead. Dead and skinned animals are turning up around the village. And one theory that Sigourney Weaver, I think, puts through is that it could be a wolf. It could be a coyote or something. And then after that, they established that it's not a coyote because they established that the creatures have come into the town. So it seems kind of obvious to me that, like, okay, yeah, it's not a coyote. But then a little bit later, Sigourney Weaver's like, well, it's not a coyote. It's like, yeah, I know it's not a coyote. It's been established. You didn't need to say that. That line seemed unnecessary to me. So that's all that my note about that is. So my next note is a very vague one, but it's also very true. Shyamalan's dialogue is weird. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it makes sense, but just the way that he writes human interaction sometimes doesn't seem realistic. The way that people talk to each other doesn't seem like how people actually talk to each other. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the dialogue is good, but every once in a while you hear a line that like, it felt weird. That didn't seem right. And that's not only in this movie. I feel like in every Shyamalan movie, maybe like The Sixth Sense is a little better. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I couldn't say, but that's definitely something that I feel watching his movies in general, that the dialogue is a little weird. I'm surprised Lucius is still alive. So, sort of spoiler alert, but this is like halfway through the movie, so I think it's okay to say I'm not giving away the ending or anything, but yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, Lucius. There's a character played by Adrian Brody, Noah, who is a mentally challenged boy who is infatuated with Ivy, who is the woman who's blind, who is in love with Joaquin Phoenix. And Adrian Brody's character gets jealous, so he stabs Joaquin Phoenix. But they show him stabbing him, like, multiple times, like at least 3 times in the stomach. And then they act like, oh, he's fine. He just needs antibiotics, which is, of course, what's used to further the plot so that Ivy can go on her mission to leave the village and get him medicine and come back. But it just feels a little crazy because he would be dead. I was surprised by that. It's like, really? Oh, low power mode, that's okay. We're still going. It just seems a little crazy because it does seem like he would be dead. And they don't even, like, show him, like they show him later, but too much later. Like they should have shown him right after the stabbing and been like, okay, this is why he's okay, you know, and explain it to us a little more. But instead, they're just like, time goes by and they act like he's dead for a little bit, and then they're like, actually he's okay, but he needs antibiotics to move on the plot. So yeah, I thought that part was a little weird, and that if they would have just showed him get stabbed once, then it would have been more believable. But the fact that he gets stabbed like 3 times, it just seems like he would be dead. Maybe I don't know enough about stabs. Maybe it's believable enough, but it just seems like he would be dead after that amount of stabbings. My next note is weird that Ivy's dad is so open about being ashamed of his daughter's blindness. So this is another example of weird Shyamalan dialogue that ends before it gets a chance to explain. So the dad is going up to the daughter, to Ivy, and he says something along the lines of, I remember being in oh, excuse me. But he says something like, okay, I need some water. Oh, just a sec. Ooh, excuse me. But yeah, he says something along the lines of, that chair that you're in, I remember being in that chair and hearing about you being blind and being so ashamed of it. And then it just cuts there. It's like, that what? What the fuck? Like, that's all you say? You don't say, like, this is your daughter. You're not going to be like, yeah, we were. And maybe he does say, but it's off screen, so it makes no sense. Maybe he does say something along the lines of, I was ashamed, but then I grew to realize that it's not a big deal and that I love you or something like that. But no, it's just that I was ashamed of your blindness, and then that's all that gets said about it. And it kind of leaves you at a point like, holy fuck, why is he's being so mean to his blind daughter? So yeah, fuck Ivy's dad. He seems like a kind of an asshole. So my next note is magic rocks. I just thought this was kind of funny. This is how they sort of explain the way that Ivy's able to get people to come with her on this journey outside of the village, is that she has these magic rocks that's supposed to protect them from the creatures. But I think it's all bullshit, and they show her dumping them out because she knows that it's bullshit, but she needs to convince these guys to come with her, even though they leave at one point. So you could debate that that's not even necessary, but I don't know. It makes enough sense, so I'll let that one slide anyway. But the magic rocks is just kind of funny. I like that, and I like the way that they say magic rocks in it. My next note is the twist has elements that do not make sense. So I'm not gonna get into the twist. Like I said, I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone. If anyone wants to watch it, this movie is on Disney Plus. If anyone wants to check it out, at least in Canada where I am, it could be different depending on the country you're in. But yeah, feel free to check it out on Disney Plus. Hardcore Logo, which I reviewed earlier, is on YouTube for free if people want to check that out. But yeah, just the twist has elements that don't make sense. I can see why people don't like the twist, but I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to spoil anything. So my next note is Ivy is blind, but not very, it seems. So this is not the only movie that does this, but this is almost a trope at this point. The blind character that doesn't really seem like they're blind because they can just walk around and it's fine, and she doesn't seem to be hitting anything, and you know, all blindness is different, right? So she could not be 100% blind, but still, my point is that just she's very good at being blind, so she's good at knowing her surroundings and stuff. So it makes enough sense, but you could almost have had this same story with her not being blind, and it wouldn't have lost anything. But it's fine, I guess. You know, it's kind of annoying when they have those characters in movies. And they're like, is she blind? Like, does she even need to be blind? But it's fine. It's fine. Moving on. Last note, and I've already said this kind of, but Jesse Eisenberg is in this movie, and he's in it for a second, and I'm just like shocked to see him because it was like at the end too. It was like, oh my god, and he might have been in other scenes, but I didn't notice or something. But he's at the end and he has a line. I'm like, oh my god, it's Jesse Eisenberg because he has a very recognizable tone of voice. So I right away I was like, oh, it's him. Oh my goodness. Anyways, that's the end of my notes, and I think that's the end of the review. So, What am I gonna give The Village? Well, this is not the best Shyamalan movie, but it's certainly not the worst. And I might even like this a little more than Signs. Um, and it does do the creepiness very well. Yes, it has a lot of the things that Shyamalan generally does poorly. Like some of the dialogue's weird, some of the elements of the twist don't make sense, but it's still fun and it does the story well enough, and it does keep you, especially if it's your first time watching it, it does keep you guessing and keep you thinking what's going to happen, even if you don't love the outcome, which I didn't mind. I don't hate the twist. There's just some things about it that could have been better, I think. But anyways, again, without revealing too much, I'll just say that. But yeah, The Village, I'm going to give it, let's give it 6.8. I feel like it doesn't quite deserve a 7, but it's really not bad as far as Shyamalan movies goes. I put it like mid, not as good as Unbreakable, not as good as Sixth Sense. I haven't seen all of them too. I haven't seen Lady in the Water, but I do like this movie. It's not perfect, but it's also not awful. So yeah, The Village, 6.8 out of 10 ducks.